Welcome in, everyone. The case we're diving into today, it's one of those Hollywood tragedies that just sticks with you. Brittany Murphy, gone too soon. And under such strange circumstances, we're going to try to untangle it all, go beyond those initial headlines, really dig into what we know and what we don't know.
And there's a lot we don't know, even all these years later. Brittany's death, and then, of course, the death of her husband, Simon Monjack, just a few months later. It wasn't just a Hollywood story. It was a story that asked some really unsettling questions. Questions about health, about Hollywood, even about what happens behind closed doors.
Exactly. Brittany Murphy, and I think most people will picture her right away clueless. That energy, that smile, she just lit up the screen. But behind that image, things weren't always sunshine and roses, were they? There were whispers about her health, worries about her career, whispers about her finances, and then December 2009, everything changes.
December 20th, 2009. Brittany collapses in her Hollywood Hills home. Sudden, unexpected, especially for someone so young. By the time paramedics got her to Cedars-Sinai, it was too late.
And the official cause of death, pneumonia, it feels almost too simple, doesn't it? Like, how could that take down someone seemingly in the prime of life?
That's the thing about this case. Nothing is as simple as it seems. Yes, the autopsy did cite pneumonia as the primary cause of death, but, and this is a big but, it also pointed to anemia and something that always makes these cases more complicated, multiple drug intoxication. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions about illicit drugs or anything like that, we need to be clear. These were prescriptions, over-the-counter medications, things someone might take for a really bad cold or flu.
But the combination itself, though, right, that's where the questions start. Was it the kind of mix that could have unintended consequences, especially given her age, or was there something more at play?
That's what everyone wanted to know. Those lingering questions, the what-ifs, they're what kept people talking, speculating. And then, just as those whispers were starting to get louder, tragedy struck again. Simon Monjack, Brittany's husband, he dies in that same house. And the cause of death, almost identical. Acute pneumonia, severe anemia, the odds of that are astronomically low.
Like something out of a movie, honestly. And of course, people start connecting the dots, looking for explanations that go beyond just a tragic coincidence. Was it something in the house? I remember that being a big theory at the time, right?
The mold theory. It comes up a lot in these cases, and it's not entirely out of left field. I mean, the LA Department of Public Health, they actually investigated Brittany's house, and they did find mold. But they ultimately ruled it out as a direct cause of either Brittany's death or Simon's. But not everyone was convinced.
And that brings us to Brittany's father, Angelo Bertolotti. He was not one to just take those official reports at face value, was he? He was positive there was something more to the story. So much so that he went ahead and commissioned an independent toxicology report.
And this is where the case really takes a turn. Because Bertolotti's report, it wasn't just different from the official findings, it was alarming. They found high levels of heavy metals in Brittany's system. And we're not talking trace amounts here, we're talking levels that pointed toward potential poisoning.
Okay, now hold on. Heavy metals. Now explain this like I'm back in high school chemistry, because that throws a whole different wrench into things. What are we even talking about here? This sounds less like a cold and more like, I don't know, a spy novel.
Yeah, we're not talking about the iron in your vitamins here. Think more like antimony, barium. These are serious heavy hitters, often found in, like, industrial settings, pesticides, some types of rat poison even. Not the kind of thing you want to find in anyone's system, let alone a young, otherwise healthy Hollywood actress.
So this isn't just some like, oh, the lab was off by a decimal point situation. These heavy metals, they shouldn't be there. In those amounts, it really points to something deliberate, something more calculated, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you have to remember the backdrop here. This is Hollywood, the land of larger-than-life stories, both on-screen and off. So when you have a young starlet, her life cut short, her husband dies under eerily similar circumstances just months later, and then you throw heavy metals into the mix, well, people's imaginations, they tend to run wild.
And they did. There were theories everywhere you looked. Accidental poisoning, targeted attacks, even some really out there stuff about government conspiracies. I mean, we're talking full-blown spy thriller territory. What's your take on all of that? Was there any weight to those more outlandish theories?
It's easy to get caught up in the speculation, especially with a case as murky as this one. Was it a horrible accident, a case of negligence, something more intentional? Without concrete proof, it's impossible to say with 100% certainty. But what we can do is look at the known facts, the timeline, and see what makes sense and what doesn't.
Okay, so let's talk about Simon Monjack for a minute. Because even without the strange circumstances of his own death, He was a bit of a shadowy figure in this whole thing, wouldn't you say? Even before Brittany passed, people were whispering about his influence on her, and not always in a positive light.
Right. To put it mildly, Simon Monjack was a complicated guy. History of financial issues, some legal troubles, and there were definitely those who felt he was more interested in Brittany's fame and money than in her actual well-being.
There were even accusations that he was controlling, that he was isolating her from her friends and family, almost as if he was trying to manage her every move. So was Simon Monjack just a grieving husband, or was there something darker going on there? It's hard to ignore that question given everything else we know.
It's a question a lot of people have asked, and for good reason. There's no denying that Simon Monjack was a controversial figure in Brittany's life. Some saw him as manipulative, opportunistic. Others maintain that he truly loved her and was utterly devastated by her loss.
It's interesting you say that because I know that documentary, What Happened, Brittany Murphy, that came out a few years ago, it painted a pretty harsh picture of Monjack. They interviewed a number of people who were close to Brittany, and they didn't hold back in their criticism of him.
Yeah, that documentary definitely stirred things up, brought the debate about Monjack's role in Brittany's life back into the spotlight. The filmmakers, they presented him as controlling, even abusive at times, and suggested that his actions played a part in her decline in those last months before her death.
And we can't forget about those toxicology reports, both the official one and the one commissioned by Brittany's father, because the differences between them are kind of shocking.
Absolutely. I mean, the official report, it acknowledged the presence of medications, but didn't flag anything overtly suspicious. But then you have Bertolotti's report, and it not only finds those heavy metals, but even points to potential sources, including rat poison. And that's not something you can easily brush aside.
So we're left with these two very different narratives. One, a tragic accident, a perfect storm of awful circumstances. The other, the possibility of foul play, whether intentional or not. And at the center of it all is Brittany Murphy, a young woman whose life was cut tragically short. It's heartbreaking, you know? Because I think what gets to people, what makes Brittany's case stick with them even after all these years, is that she wasn't just a celebrity. She was this vibrant, talented young woman, someone who clearly touched a lot of lives. And to think her life cut short under such baffling circumstances, it's unsettling, to say the least.
It really is.
Yes.
And you know, we've been focusing a lot on the toxicology, the theories, all the speculation. But we can't forget that human element. Brittany's death, Simon's death, so soon after. It sent ripples through Hollywood and far beyond.
It wasn't just another one of those, another celebrity tragedy kind of things, was it? People who knew Brittany, who worked with her, they were shaken to their core. And I remember, even as someone who just enjoyed her movies, it just felt different, like a wave of sadness, but also this really uneasy feeling, like something wasn't adding up.
And that feeling, that unease, it's what keeps this case alive for people, even now. Because there are no easy answers. We have theories, speculation, but nothing definitive. And when you don't have those clear-cut answers, it's only natural to keep asking, what if?
What if the toxicology reports told the whole story? What if Simon Monjack's influence was even greater than anyone knew? Those are questions that don't have easy answers, and they're questions that linger even after all this time.
And maybe that's part of Brittany's legacy, even if it's a difficult one. Not just her talent, which was obvious, but this enduring mystery surrounding her death. It reminds us that life is complex, even in a world as seemingly glamorous as Hollywood. And sometimes, even with all the evidence we have, some questions just remain unanswered.
We may never know for sure what happened to Brittany Murphy, but hopefully, by revisiting her case, looking at the facts, acknowledging the many layers of speculation, we can at least honor her memory and maybe, just maybe, make a little more sense of a truly senseless loss. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's a heavy one, but sometimes it's the heavy stories that stay with us the longest.